Rising's debate coverage continues. Next up, we have Jill Stein, presidential candidate for the Green Party. Jill Stein, welcome to Rising.
You, Robbie, and everyone, Amber and Jessica. Yes, wonderful to see you all.
It's wonderful to have you on our program. We are obviously reacting, all of America is, to what we saw on our TV screens last night. What was your impression of the debate between Presidents Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump?
Well, it really underscored what an incredibly dysfunctional two-party system we have that has basically, prevented a competitive process from taking place until now, especially within the Democratic Party. They are paying big time, and I think the American people are just reacting in horror. They already wanted other options in this race, and I think this has just underscored why we need more choices and more voices in particular, and why candidates like myself, the Libertarian candidate, those of us who are on the ballot for a majority of voters right now, why we needed to be in that debate, not for our sake, but the American people have a right to vote, and we have a right to know who we vote for, especially when people are tearing their hair out at the zombie candidates being rammed down our throats.
Right. We have a lot of Democrats saying you have to vote for Democrats, otherwise you're being a spoiler. I would say a lot of people wanted to vote for Democrats in a Democratic primary. But now we're in this stage of the election where people saw the debates last night, and I think they're considering all of their options. And a lot of people think about the Greens as a very environmentally focused party, that they want to talk about climate change. They're narrowly focused, maybe so, on green energy. Can you speak to some of the other major platforms you're running on? We heard a lot of talk about the economy and immigration last night. I'm curious your stance on those major issues.
Yes, absolutely. And let me just say that notion that the title green describes the party, that's like outdated. I think you can say that pretty much the progressive agenda as it now stands was actually launched by Greens, starting with healthcare as a human right under a so-called single-payer system at the time, now Medicare for All. That was launched by Ralph Nader in the year 2000. Free public higher education, bailing out the students like we bailed out the crooks on Wall Street. That was launched by my 2012 campaign, calling for a Green New Deal, which basically revives the economy, creates a manufacturing economy again, transitions our economy while creating millions of good jobs that are healthy for workers, healthy for the environment, healthy for our economy, at the same time that we're addressing the climate crisis and cutting the military budget down to size, from this incredibly dangerous, over-endowed program that we currently have, which is blowing up the world, on the verge of nuclear war on at least two fronts right now. Greens have long called for cutting the military budget at least in half and putting those resources where we need it here at home. And one other issue to mention, which is housing. We actually call for urgent, emergency solutions, because half of all people who rent their quarters now, their living areas now, half of all renters are paying at over 30% to where they are severely economically stressed. We should have nationwide rent control. We should have a really intensive system of creating so-called social housing, which is done in Europe, which provides housing as a human right, mixed, economically integrated, high quality, environmentally designed housing with built-in green space and public transportation. All of this is very much, a priority. And in fact, Greens have actually set the agenda here. We have launched these issues that the Democrats have taken up only in name, give lip service to, but actually don't do the job. And on healthcare, for example, we call for a Medicare for All system, which would cut the waste, the red tape, and the bureaucracy that are built into our current system, costing us 17% of our GDP, and basically the most expensive healthcare system in the world, which does not deliver. We're twice as much as the next greatest spender, that being Canada. 1 out of every 3 healthcare dollars is essentially wasted, and Medicare for All cuts out that waste. It otherwise leaves the system the same, except that it allows people then to have choice over their healthcare provider, their hospital, their healthcare facility, and covers head to toe, including mental health, dental health, reproductive reproductive health, chronic care, home care. It does all that while cutting the cost by 30%. The overhead in in our current system is 33%. In Medicare for all, it's 3%. So those are some of the solutions that are desperately needed by the American people right now. And creating a sustainable and healthy climate, air, water, et cetera, is part of the picture, but it's by no means the whole picture or even the dominant element of the picture.
We also see that a top 2 issue for voters is immigration, and a majority now say that they support mass deportations, including a plurality of Latino voters. What is the Green Party's position on immigration, especially when it comes to securing the southern border during our current crisis?
Yeah, we have a very different position on immigration. We say that instead of spending billions of dollars on a wall, which actually doesn't keep people out, it does contribute to greater deaths, but it doesn't do the job. Instead of spending billions on the wall, we should be spending that money on providing the civil infrastructure, the legal infrastructure, so that people can be screened and can be then plugged in to working. Immigrants more than pay their way. In fact, they are said to be approximately $7 trillion worth of economic development over the next decade if they were processed, given papers, after being properly screened, then given papers and allowed to work. Then they are a huge economic boon that our communities would be competing for. But let me say also, the most important thing that we talk about for addressing the crisis of immigration is to stop causing it in the first place. Because if you look at what's driving people to migrate, it's several crises that we have been, shall we say, leading the way on, including regime change operations, economic predatory corporate interference in other economies, the drug wars, which create basically the cartels and make them economically profitable. That is this whole system of making drugs illegal. We advocate treating substance use as a public health problem rather than a criminal problem, which will then basically pull the rug out from under the violent cartels, which are driving so many people over the border, and for us to actually address the climate crisis, which is a major cause of migration right now as well.
Yes, and Dr. Stein, before we have to let you go, obviously I want you to respond to what you heard from the candidates last night on foreign policy, on Israel specifically. I know Biden has come under so much scrutiny from progressives, from aspects of his own base, from Arab Americans in the pivotal all over the country, but including in the pivotal state of Michigan, which he must win. Trump has not said anything very specifically on this subject and was prompted to last night and then ended up not saying very much. I think both candidates wanted to avoid this issue entirely. Where do you depart from them?
Oh, entirely. This is a disaster. The genocidal war being conducted by Israel is basically blood on our hands. The U.S. is enabling it. We are paying for it. We provide 80% of the weapons as well as the diplomatic cover. So this is really blood on our hands. We need, like the American people want, and like the International Court of Justice, the Security Council of the UN, the General Assembly, the International Criminal Court, all support a diplomatic solution in accordance with international law and human rights, which are being massively violated here. This did not start on October 7th. This has been going on essentially for 75 years, that ethnic cleansing has unfortunately was baked into the plan. And I say this as a person of Jewish background, who's been somewhat familiar with these issues for a long time. There were national archives in Israel, historic archives that became available in the 1990s and completely changed the understanding of what's going on here. There's been essentially, a campaign of terror conducted against Palestinians since the Zionists came. Before they did, Jews, Christians, and Muslims lived together in peace. And when the Zionists came, they drove out not just the Muslims, but also the Jews and the Christians. This is a problem of Zionism. It should not be conflated with anti-Semitism. It's really a miserable commentary on the state of our civil liberties, our freedom of speech, and so on. That discussion of this issue has basically been shut down. We saw that last night, although Trump did say, that the Israelis should be allowed to quote, finish the job, close quote. So he was expressing, as he has previously, absolutely violent and genocidal notions himself. So, it's not like one is a better choice than the other. The American people should not be limited to these two candidates, one a rather psychopathic xenophobe and demagogue, and the other something of a dementia patient. We should be allowed the full choice that we have. And actually, as you may or may not be aware, the Democrats are really going to the mat in order to try to suppress their choices. They've hired an army of lawyers. They are in the process of trying to throw us off the ballot. They've also advertised for infiltrators and spies, so they're pulling out all the stops. I encourage people to go to JillStein2024.com and check out your other options, because there are adults in the room here, and they badly need to be lifted up, and the American people should be empowered to make choices that actually address our critical needs, because at the end of the day, it is the American people who are really, paying to the hilt right now.
We've heard more policy positions that are concrete in these few minutes than in probably all of the debate last night. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Jill Stein.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Take care.
Stick and stay. We've got more debate coverage for you just coming up next.